You're not fooling anyone with those drum samples. You sound like every other local band demoing in their mom's garage. Flaccid, fake, and forgettable. Because deep down, you know the truth. You never figured out how to make real drums sound good. And your one attempt 5 years ago sounded like someone beaten off at a Greyhound bus stop. But here's the thing. You don't want to sound like everybody else. You want to sound massive, unique, real, well, hyper-realistic. So today, I'm going to show you how it's done using two techniques that you won't find anywhere on YouTube. No samples, no fake nonsense. This is how you take your drums from wimpy to WMD, from polite to violent, from brick wall limiter to bricks through your windows. You get the idea. I got a million of these.
Very polite snare.
Very polite snare.
Nobody wants polite sounding drums. Drum companies want you to believe that you need a $10,000 kit. Plug-in companies say you need their plastic sounding samples, but none of that shit's true, because the most iconic bands of this era, Meshuggah, Sleep Token, Decapitated, Slipknot, etc., aren't winning with fake drums. They're sculpting their sound with real, gnarly, perfectly captured chaos. Sure, you might not have their budget, but you can learn their process. Now, in my last video, we heard 8 top-tier mixing artists mix the same song, and you all went nuts over Buster Odelholm's huge drum mix. So I tracked down one of his most mind-blowing techniques for guitar and bass and adapted it to drums. Now, I've watched literally hundreds of drum videos on YouTube, and I've never seen anyone do this trick before. But before I show you that, we're gonna have to start where all great drum sounds begin. We're gonna start with a mic and the hardest thing to record on a drum kit. An 18-inch floor tom from hell. 18-inch floor toms are notoriously difficult to record, which is why you normally only see them in your uncle's Led Zeppelin cover band. So if these techniques work here on this drum, they'll work on any drum. Here's what the old heads sound like, tuned up. Notice how there's a distinct goom, goom, goom sound to the attack that's not present in the 14-inch floor tom that's sitting right next to it, or the 16-inch floor tom on the other side of the kit. Now here's the 18-inch tom with a new head on and all of the muffling taken off and out of the drum. And now here it is with a single moon gel on the batter head. If anything, the single gel made the goom sound even more pronounced. So that's not gonna work. So now we're gonna switch mics and experiment with mic positioning. These are the two most powerful things you can do to change the sound of your drums after head choice and tuning. First up, the SE Electronics V-Beat. I'm gonna be hitting the drum while moving the microphone around and listening to how it changes. When you're listening, notice how dramatically the balance of the attack, body, and sustain changes when I'm moving the mic around. To do this properly, I'll have my in-ear monitors in and will be direct monitoring from my interface. This is crucial because it'll let you hear the tiniest changes that are happening while you're moving the mic rather than having to guess where you were later on. Okay, so now that I've figured out the distance that I want, I now have the microphone 3.5 inches away from the rim of the drum like I figured out with the previous test. Okay, so now that I've got it 3.5 inches away, now I'm going to adjust the angle of the microphone and see which one works best. In this case, the V-Beat sounded fine, but I'm not sure that it sounds any better than the Beta 98 that I had on before. So let's move on. I'm going to repeat the same test, but now I'm using the SE Electronics V-Kick, the kick mic that every Instagram drummer seems to love. I heard it on an 18-inch floor tom in a video once and thought it sounded super cool. Same process as before. First, I find the height and the distance from the hoop, and then I'll find the angle. I'll have both dip switches engaged on the microphone because metal. I'm still not happy with either of these, so I'm going to pull out my trusty Audix D6s. I loved how they sounded on toms a few years ago, and I know what they're capable of, so here we go. So now that we've heard all the microphones back to back, They all have a pretty like similar character. They seem to sound the best from roughly the same distance. They all seem to sound best about 3.5 inches away from the hoop, and they all seem to sound best pointed either directly at the middle of the drum or about 2/3 of the way from the middle of the drum. But they all seem to have the same problem. The first problem is that it resonates for too long. This will tend to happen when you get really good at tuning, is that floor tom note will hang out for a very long time. So I want to shorten that without changing the character. And the way I'm going to do that is with a cotton ball. I'm going to unravel this thing like so, right? I'm going to do this to a couple of them. So you basically unroll them like so, and you start pulling it out very slowly. This takes a while, probably takes about 5 minutes per one, and you're going to end up with something like this. We're going to lay this inside the drum, and what it's going to do is it's going to shorten the sustain by flying up when you hit the drum and then laying down on that resonant head, but it's not going to change the character of the drum at all. The second thing is, if you notice that horrible ping, 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 sound, that basketball bouncing in a gymnasium, the same phenomenon that you would get from an untreated kick drum. And the reason why is because that high end is bouncing around inside this big drum, giving weird phase cancellations and doing lots of nastiness. And so the way we're going to fix it is with some fabric. So this is a piece of a pillowcase that I cut out, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to suspend it in the floor tom using the lugs. And what's going to happen is this little piece of fabric is going to break up the sound waves when they're bouncing back and forth, so they don't give us that horrible sound. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to put something on the ground under the floor tom to help break up the sound bouncing back and forth from it, right? When you have a tom that's mostly parallel against the floor, you're just asking for a lot of weird resonances. You could put anything. Some people put pebbles or rocks. Some people put bricks. I'm going to put some sandbags like this that have pellets in them, and I'm just going to kind of lay them on the floor under the floor tom to help break up some of those standing waves, so we can just get a nice clear note and no resonant wonkiness. After repeating the test with all of the implements in and on the drum, there was a clear winner. And I don't know about you, but for me, there was no contest. The D6 is exactly what I'm looking for in a big floor tom. So now I'm going to show you how to supercharge your toms by using an EQ match from a sample that you already like, and using that to make your toms sound like cannons. So I've got my D6 here, okay? I'm going to just copy this clip. I'm going to paste it right here. Now we've got the exact same clip, and what I've done is I've loaded a Slate trigger sample. I loaded it from the Black Album kit. I have muted the two room mics, so I just have the close mic playing, and it is going to sound like this. That's what the sample sounds like. I'm going to use the EQ curve from the Slate trigger sample and apply it to my D6 and see how close that gets me. The way you do this is you have to make sure you have Pro Q4 on both tracks, and this is what we're going to do. I'm going to come down here, I'm going to click on my D6, right? Click this little arrow, I'm going to EQ match. And I'm going to EQ match it to, I'm going to go other instance, and I'm going to go the trigger sample 2, because that is the one in this project. And then I am simply going to play it. I'm going to loop it just to give it enough time to make sure that it's got a really solid EQ curve that we can match to. So here we go. That should be good. And then now we're going to simply hit match. All right, and it gave us this EQ curve. It says it needs 11 bands to do it. We'll see about that. We'll start with the 11 bands for now and see what we have to adjust. I hit finish, closed out, and now here I am. So the first thing, let me mute this. The First thing that you'll notice whenever you're doing the otherwise amazing EQ matching for Pro Q4 is that it never does a high pass filter. It always does these really wacky, either like, bell cuts, sometimes it'll do this really long one, and I just get rid of that. And I bring over my high pass. I already know what my tom is tuned to, so I'll go at about there. That should work. And now let's listen and see what it sounds like with the EQ matching exactly the way it is. With it off. With it on. Now, that might be a little extreme. So sometimes what you can do, like see this right here, this cut at 16 kilohertz. Nah, we're good. And sometimes what you can do is if the EQ matching is a little too extreme, you can grab all of the points. Watch this. I'll grab all of these points here and I can just kind of like, bring them down a little bit. So they're not so extreme. You mess around with that and then you see what gets you to the tone that you want. Now I'm going to add some compression here, and now let's listen. That sounds pretty neat. Now I have already done this previously, so I'm going to load the one after I spent some time kind of tweaking it and seeing how it was going to work. So let's load it in. This is the one I got. Now check this out. All we've got is EQ and a little tiny bit of compression, right? The UAD 1176, taking off maybe like 4 dBs. Look at this. Sounds pretty great, huh? And you can see I was kind of experimenting with if I wanted to keep this super huge high boost right here, but I don't think I like it at all. Listen. Much better. I thought I would show you what it sounds like if I did the same EQ matching trick to the other 3 microphones that we used. So just to remind you, here's what they sound like raw. See, all the effects are currently turned off. And then now we're going to turn on the effects. And now I'm going to show you what it sounds like with the EQ matching for each individual microphone. Each one of them were matched to the Slate Trigger 2 sample. I didn't apply the same EQ. I matched each one of them, and this is what it sounds like. I'm going to open all these so you can kind of look at them. All right, and here they are. So you can kind of see what's happening. Here we go. Now let's toss it in my tracking template with some music and see how it sounds. Not bad for a guy who does a mix, huh? If you were wondering how I strip silence all my mics oh so perfectly, check out this video here. If you like my snare sound, check out this video here. If you liked how my kick drum sounded, check out this video here. And if you want to hear 8 God tier mix engineers mix the same metal song, check out this video somewhere around here. That's all for now. Thanks a lot.